Influence. It plays a role in our day-to-day life, and it plays a role in how we make our decisions. It plays a role in how hard we go every day in our day-to-day hustle. And so what I want to do is take a step back and really figure out what influences us. Understanding what influences you and understanding what influences those around you is a very powerful concept that I want to talk about in this episode. As a kid, who was our influence was our parents or our guardians. It was the adults in the room that provided the most influence. And so this is why, as an adult now, if you look at a room full of kids and you said, hey guys, listen up, each and every single one of them will look at you like in amazement, right? Because you're like a giant. And you're, of course, older, so you have a little bit more of authoritative figure amongst these children. Because children are influenced by their parents, anyone who is similar to their parents that has somewhat control of that engagement, right? Because they look at you as almost like a parent figure, and so you can play influence. And this is why kids sometimes seem timid or seem shy, is because they're looking at you and they don't know you, but should they listen to you? Should they be scared of you? They don't know how to be influenced by you. And the same concept goes now as adults. We're influenced by, let's say, law enforcement. And so when you're cruising down the street or you're on the freeway and you see in the corner of your eye that law enforcement car, that sheriff car, or you see law enforcement right behind you, you're influenced to do a quick check, right? You do a quick check on the speed that you're doing. You put both hands on the wheel. You start thinking like, oh man, am I doing anything wrong? You become influenced to act a certain way. Same thing happens with teachers, right? And so when you go into a classroom and the teacher is there, that teacher presence or that adult presence, they have a specific influence. And remember when you used to get the substitute teacher, right? It wasn't necessarily your teacher. That substitute teacher had a specific influence. It wasn't your everyday teacher that you acted a certain way. It was some substitute. And so now you act a completely different way. The root of how we react and how we proceed and perceive the situation at hand. And so I want you to think about that, because maybe today you can take a step back and just really kind of pay attention. Pay attention to what influences people around you. What influences your coworker to act the way they act, or what influences the top producer to keep grinding it out so strong. And how do they stay, that confident? How do they stay that hungry? And on the flip side, you can look at the bottom producers who are always usually at the bottom of that production chart on your sales floor. And then look at them and wonder, well, what influences them? What influences them to continue taking the beating on a sales floor? What influences them to not want to be at the top of the chart? And you learn so much about influence. You learn maybe the bottom dweller or the bottom producers on your sales floor are not easily influenced. Like, they're more influenced about their own personal opinion. So they believe that as long as I'm happy, then that's really what counts, right? And so happiness to them could just be the security of knowing that they made rent. Whereas the happiness for a top producer on your sales floor is the security knowing that they are the best. It's beyond money. It's beyond the compensation. They just want to be on the top of the sales chart, or they just want the acknowledgement, because all we know in their past, they never had the acknowledgement. Or maybe at work, they have this identity that they don't have in the outside world. They have this identity that they just don't have within their work environment. And so when we identify these influences and we understand that influence not only plays a role in ourselves as salesmen, but also plays a role within our prospect, then we can adapt it to our engagement within the prospect. And so our prospects have influences. And the same concept of your teacher to a substitute teacher simply applies to them when they think of, salesman versus consultant. And so when your prospect speaks to a salesman, they're influenced to react in a certain way. But when your prospect speaks to a doctor, they're influenced to respond in a specific way. And so to a salesman, they could be on guard. To a salesman, it's like they're interviewing a candidate to work for them. Like they're picking up somebody in front of Home Depot, right? Like, hey, what do you got? What do you do? It's almost like that type of reaction. But if that prospect went to a licensed medical doctor, then they would have a certain way about them. Your prospect would be a little bit more engaging. They would be less on guard, right? Because their perception is that they're speaking with a professional or a subject matter expert. And this is how you need to hold yourself. Have the same tonality in your voice. Have the same body language. Have the same work ethic. Have the same dress and appearance. The way that they talk to you is that they're the ones really in control, right? So when your doctor's asking you questions, you're listening. You're responding, right? But they're just asking questions and they're listening to you. They're in that moment is the reason why they become a consultant. The doctor or the lawyer is not worried about selling you. They're not worried about what objections you have. Think back to the last time you talked to one of these subject matter experts. You're going to realize that they're just communicating with you. And so is that the secret? Is that the secret of how to properly influence and persuade? Is just completely being a parent and acknowledging the way that you're being perceived? I believe so. For more helpful information and more helpful content, please be sure to hit the subscribe button. Do me a favor, if this video helps you and this video makes sense, like and comment. I got a question for you. Have you downloaded the sales script yet? Have you gone to SalesRemastered.com where it says boost your sales today? It says enter your name and your email address. Have you taken the time to download that content? Even if you don't need the sales script, there is a 3-page piece that I made and I wrote that has to do with influence. It actually has to do with 3 things that you can do to stay relevant in sales and to stay a top producer on your sales floor. And even if you're not in sales, this is just something to give you a mindset hack of how to be better at what you're currently doing right now. And influencing doesn't just apply to sales, right? Like when I'm talking about all these sales tips, and for example, if you're not in sales, use this in other means of communicating. So if you're communicating to your manager that you want to be considered for a job promotion, you can use sales. If you want to communicate to your spouse on where to eat for that night, you can use sales. If you want to communicate to your child or your children on how to take a specific message and how to act a specific way, you can use sales. If you want to talk to anyone and everyone around you and you need them to react in a specific way, you can use sales. So I hope this content helps. If this is your first time visiting, please consider subscribing. Looking forward to your likes, your comments, and your shares. I'll see you in the next video.